Hello, mortals. I am the booktube goddess, the #1 drag queen booktuber on YouTube. Okay, calm down, calm down. I know you're excited because it is time for another game of Shelve It or Shove It, the completely superficial way where I pick books for my TBR based solely on their cover. And as per usual, I'm going to be looking on Goodreads at the covers for their new releases in 3 categories: young adult, science fiction, and fantasy. And I will be picking at least one book to add to my TBR. So let's get started with young adult, because first up is Zirin J. Zhao's Iron Widow. And it is a cover, very Asian themed. I'm getting a spaceship, maybe. I don't know. It's either fantasy or science fiction. For some reason, I'm getting a sci-fi vibe from it, and I think this is a gorgeous cover. Oh, we're starting off good because I'm going to shelve it. Next up, we have The Hawthorne Legacy by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. If you've been watching me, you know I'm not a huge fan of the covers where the title and the font of the title is prominent and there's stuff around it. However, that said, this is pretty striking. These blue roses, it looks like there's chess pieces, a sword, a crown, a jewel. It says a deadly game, a puzzle to solve. Now, this is a fantasy type cover, but I guess it is also a mystery. An Inheritance Games novel, so I assume this is part of a series. So, although I'm not a fan of this type of cover, this is one of the better ones I've seen. But since it's a series, I think I am going to shove it. Next up is Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. Now, just from the title, I am thinking it's a fairy tale retelling, like Once Upon a Time. I don't know what it would be a retelling of. I kind of like the image of some type of heart-shaped filigree image that's disintegrating. I do actually like that. Do I like it enough that I would pick it up just by the cover? Probably not. I am going to shove it. Next up is White Smoke by Tiffany D. Jackson. I am getting horror vibes from it, and it is October coming up, but honestly, I haven't had very much luck with young adult horror. I tried it over and over again, but I don't think I'm going to give it another try, even though this is a very beautiful cover. There's the young woman of color's head. It looks like there's smoke. It looks like, I don't know, there's bats and tentacles or something in a haunted house. Oh, I do kind of like the cover, but I'm just not going to torture myself again with a young adult horror, so I'm going to shove it. And the last book in young adult is As Good as Dead by Holly Jackson. This looks like a young adult thriller, aka something on the lines of The Ivies by Alexa Dunn. It's not really speaking to me, but if you're into thrillers, maybe this cover would be attractive to you. Not so much for me. I'm going to shove it. Now we move on to science fiction. And first up is Constance by Matthew Fitzsimmons. And very simple cover. There is a red thumbprint with an infinity sign in it, and a recommendation from Blake Crouch. Well, I'm going to guess it's artificial intelligence based, and I know that is a big popular science fiction theme these days, but from this cover, going to Shelve. Next up is Light from Uncommon Stars by Rika Aoki. Apologies if I'm not pronouncing that right. It looks like a koi fish in a space background, which is kind of interesting. I do actually like the colors and the image on this cover. I don't have any idea what it's about. It looks like there is a recommendation from TJ Klune, which is always good, but don't know enough from the cover. I'm going to shove it. Next up is Dare to Know by James Kennedy, and this cover is pretty basic. There's an hourglass and these psychedelic boxes all around it. I don't care to know about Dare to Know, so sorry, gonna have to shove it. Next up is The All-Consuming World by Cassandra Kaw. And there looks like someone falling down a pit or a rabbit hole or something that's kind of psychedelic. I like the saturated colors, even though this is quite a dark cover. And the two people, I don't know, are fighting or something. I am intrigued by this cover, but I don't think I'm intrigued enough to, well, the more I look at it, the more I like the cover. Okay, let's go ahead and shelve it. And finally, in science fiction, The Actual Star by Monica Byrne. Very generic looking cover. I do like how the font has these orange boxes around it, but okay, space. I mean, if I knew the author, maybe, and you know what, I may have even picked this up and read the blurb, but that's not what we're doing here. As you know, I just am picking books by the cover, which always has some interesting results. But for this cover, I'm gonna have to shove it. Now we move on to fantasy. And first up is Inheritance of Orquídea Divina by Zorita Cordova. I love the title. I don't know what it means. It sounds like a drag queen's name, Orquídea Divina. There's this little symbol that says top shelf. I don't know what that means. If you know what it means, let me know in the comments. But I guess it's some type of award. And do I like it enough to, gosh, it's a woman's head, I'm assuming Latina, and there's flowers behind her. Yeah, I think I'm going to shelve it. Oh boy, next up, Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune. I think people were talking about this in my live stream. I don't know if this is a sequel to The House on the Cerulean Sea, but TJ Klune, as many of you know, started with young adult, but when he migrated to adult fantasy, he continued using that wonderful middle grade voice, which gives his writing almost this fairy tale quality, which I adored. So just on the name of the author, I'm inclined to pick this up, but I actually do like this cover. I like the cartoony feel of it. The tagline is "Death is only their beginning." I'm not sure what that means. And the three houses stacked on each other. I like this cover. The silhouette of the stag in the back. Of course, I'm going to shelve it. Oh boy, the next one. The Last Graduate by one of my favorite authors, Naomi Novik. And I know this is, well, it says lesson 2 of the Skullman's, but I've read the first novel in this series, Deadly Education, and I loved it. It's sort of, what do they call it, dark academia books that are popular now, but it's written for adults, and even though we get a young girl going to this magic school, it is very dark, And I loved how this school is so international. You really got a global sort of world building experience. Now I will say, I know there is controversy on A Deadly Education. Real quick, the issue was in A Deadly Education, one of the characters with dreadlocks had their dreadlocks dissolve or something in A Deadly Education. Now here's sort of the background. The setting in A Deadly Education was this school that these people go to corrupts everything around them. And Naomi Novik kind of extrapolated, well, if anyone had dreadlocks, those dreadlocks are going to become corrupted as well. Well, it got some blowback from people who felt dreadlocks represent a religious, spiritual, cultural maybe aspect, and felt that the description of how the dreadlocks were being corrupted by the school, it didn't sit very well with some people. Well, Naomi Novik subsequently said, well, she's going to take that part out or rewrite that part in subsequent editions. I don't know what more to expect from her. I guess the argument was that she didn't have enough sensitivity readers, but it didn't bother me when I read it, but I'm not the audience that would have been offended by it. I understand why some people were offended by it, but she listened and is correcting future versions. So you decide for yourself. I want to continue with this series. I am going to shelve The Graduate. Next up is No Gods, No Monsters by Cadwell Turnbull. And what is this? I think there's a fish and there's a cat and a snake. It's all very dark in the background, so the title and the author's name really pop out in white. Don't have any idea what it's about. I am going to have to shove it. And finally, we have a Joe Abercrombie book. I say that because there are a lot of books this month of authors I just automatically pick up. Joe Abercrombie is one, so is Naomi Novik, so is TJ Klune. Well, okay, let's look at the cover. It's Joe Abercrombie, The Wisdom of Crowds. It has a white cover with specks on it, and there looks like a great axe with a owl at the top. There is a recommendation by Robin Hobb, another one of my favorite authors. Oh boy, you know, I am going to have to shelve it. Well, it's especially hard to narrow this down when there are a lot of authors I've seen that I like, but let's recap everything that I shelved. In young adult, I shelved Iron Window by Zirin J. Zhao. In science fiction, I shelved The All-Consuming World by Cassandra Khaw. And in fantasy, we shelved The Inheritance of Orquídea Divina by Zoraida Cordova, Under the Whispering Door by T.J. Klune, and The Last Graduate by Naomi Novik, and finally, The Wisdom of Crowds by Joe Abercrombie. Well, since there was such a solid showing in fantasy, I think we're going to stick with fantasy. I was just going to do one book this month, but I can't. I want to add them all. I want to add them all. They all look interesting. I think I'm definitely going to keep the TJ Klune. Now, I know I'm going to read the Naomi Novik and Joe Abercrombie because I want to continue with this series, but there is something about this title, The Inheritance of Orquídea Divina, that is just calling to me. You know what? I'm going to pick two books, Under the Whispering Door, The Inheritance of Orquídea Divina, and we'll save The Last Graduate and Wisdom of Crowds for another time. So let's see what I've gotten myself into. Oh my gosh. Okay, The Inheritance of Orchidea Divina. Let's read the blurb. The Montoyas are used to a life without explanations. They know better than to ask why the pantry never seems to run low or empty, or why their matriarch won't ever leave their home in Four Rivers, even for graduations, weddings, or baptisms. But when Orchidea Divina invites them to her funeral and to collect their inheritance, they hope to learn the secrets that she has held onto so tightly their whole lives. Instead, Orchidea is transformed, leaving them with more questions than answers. 7 years later, her gifts have manifested in different ways for Marimer, Ray, and Tatanelli's daughter Rhiannon, granting them unexpected blessings, but soon a hidden figure begins to tear through their family tree, picking them off one by one as it seeks to destroy Orchidea's line. Determined to save what's left of their family and uncover their truth behind their inheritance, the four descendants travel to Ecuador, to the place where Orchidea buried her secrets and broken promises and never looked back. Okay, I am so excited to read this one. It's giving me sort of a witch-themed fantasy, contemporary fantasy in a culture I'm not that familiar with, but I am looking forward to finding out. I like the mystery. I love the idea of this, I guess, magical transformative creature named Orchidea Divina and her family tree and clueless relatives. This sounds like a lot of fun to read. Okay, so let's go on to the T.J. Klune, Under the Whispering Door. When a reaper comes to collect Wallace Price from his own funeral, Wallace suspects that he really might be dead. Instead of leading him directly to the afterlife, the reaper takes him to a small village. On the outskirts, off the path through the woods, tucked between mountains, is a particular tea shop run by a man named Hugo. Hugo is the tea shop's owner to locals and the ferryman to souls who need to cross over. But Wallace isn't ready to abandon the life he barely lived. With Hugo's help, he finally starts to learn about all the things he missed in life. When the manager, a curious and powerful being, arrives at the tea shop and gives Wallace 1 week to cross over, Wallace sets about living a lifetime in 7 days. Okay, I really had no idea what this book was about, but it is a book about the afterlife, and I am expecting something whimsical told in a fairy tale manner. Okay. Got to let me know what books you would have picked from this month's selection. I'm kind of excited about the 2 books that I picked, even though there were a couple more that I wanted to read. And again, I will be reading Naomi Novik and Joe Abercrombie's books, but probably not this month because it's October and I already want to read some horror novels. Please do me a huge favor and like this video and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Until we meet again, may all the books you read be blessed.